James, we cannot hear you. We're not getting any audio from you, James. I can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Same
All
problem
right.
as last week. But hey, I'm James Kern, as you just said, with Moving Conversations, brought to you by Delicate Moving. And we are powered by the Difference podcast streaming service. Um, and so today, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Darren and April Mabrey to our show every week. It's Darren and April joining me. Moving Conversations. How are we doing, guys?
Living the dream, James.
Doing awesome. How you doing?
Yeah.
Pretty good. I said this last week and I didn't figure it out. So I've already failed in my promise of figuring out this audio issue so that I could use my AirPods. But now I'm going to have to get serious about it and figure it out because I thought it was working. Hey, before we kick off the show, and our show today, as advertised, is about fear, which we started last week. But I thought I would share something with our audience. And I think, Darren, I think you saw this because I shared it with you. But I saw something on Facebook last week. And I just want to read this real quick because I think it's a great way to kick off our topic here of fear. It says, fear is worse than any drug. Fear keeps you caged and away from your purpose. And then the commentary to that was, America has become afraid to do all the stuff that makes us great. We are afraid to disagree. We are afraid to speak our minds and true feelings. And sometimes we are too selfish to listen to others without thinking we need to respond. We have been slowly molded into a fearful nation. And then the gentleman who posted this referenced John 14:27. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid. So I thought that was very appropriate for our topic this week. What do you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of the things I wanted to kind of preface, and I think what we had agreed we really wanted to dive a little deeper in last week, we kind of just at the end we started to discuss a little bit about how the different disc letters would specifically experience fear, or how they would understand fear, and that kind of thing. But before we go there, I wanted to just kind of say that, to summarize, we did a whole recap, and everybody can go back and listen to that show. But I wanted to kind of put a cap on it by saying this, that one of the biggest issues of fear, like a lot of things, fear isn't the only one, but especially with fear, is that we don't know that we're fearful. So if I were trying to say, a lot of people would come up to some circumstance and they go, well, it's not because I'm afraid. I don't fear. But they really haven't stopped down to understand exactly what is fear and then be able to figure out a way to kind of self-diagnose. And the reason is because when they've lived their entire life, or we've lived our entire lives, when we start to get that feeling and we don't like it, then we shout it down. And we have ways by, we talked about them last week. It becomes the impairment side, which we just let it turn into anxiety, which doesn't address the fear and the acknowledgement of the fear, and then have a kind of a positive plan to reach that giftedness of wisdom. But we do that. I think we just become people of judgments. And so we talked last week about how fear actually acknowledges worth of something, of self-worth and all of that. Judgment does the exact opposite. It labels, it demeans, it minimizes the importance of. It does all of those things, and we do them almost unconsciously to mask or to shout down fear. Another one is rage. We go into rage. I mean, how many times have you've seen or experienced where, like, a little kid gets lost or something, and then the parents, oh my gosh, and they hug them and then immediately get mad and go, don't you ever do that? Don't you ever walk away from me again? Without me knowing, it's a way to cover up that fear. So I think one of the most important things, regardless of our letters, James, that we need to do is we need to be able to first figure out, how do we identify that what we're actually feeling inside is fear? And we touched on that a little bit, but I think that's an important conversation, because until you understand that what you're feeling in any circumstance is actually fear, then you don't really know what to do about that.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's true. I find myself in that situation. What about you, April? Go ahead.
Do you like that, April?
I do. There was something
It's so nice.
that you were reading that made me go, read that again, James.
Well, the quote was, or the kind of the starter was, fear is worse than any drug. And this is what I like. Fear keeps you caged away from your purpose. That's the tag.
Fear
That's the
keeps
main
you
thing.
from your purpose. Right.
Yep.
And I think that, to Darren's point, if we're going to be brave enough to call what we're feeling fear, there needs to be a real big carrot. Because if we don't have a carrot, you go, well, why do I need to make myself say it's fear? Like, what's the good in that? Well, the good in it is that there's a purpose for you to be living. And we as Christians believe that each of us are here for a specific purpose. And so I think that when you read that, it was like, okay, to me, that's incentive. That's big incentive to really sit down and understand why I should make myself feel uncomfortable on purpose.
You know,
because like, well, wait a minute, I'm doing great. Just like Darren said, yelling it down, or pushing it down, or ignoring it, or distracting myself, or whatever it is that we do to keep ourselves from feeling vulnerable. So, and especially when you're in that kind of D and C world, especially, well, really all of them, no one really wants to feel fearful on purpose. So, but if we can understand and connect those dots and go, man, that's really keeping me from my ultimate purpose. And I think a great story we could tell is just this whole kind of podcast thing, right? Like, we've had all this stuff here in the office for a really long time. We've had the lights, we've had the ideas, and, both of us having some I think, didn't want to really put ourselves out there for a lot of different reasons.
Oh, I'm out there, baby.
I know you are.
I am way out there.
Right. But there was some fear in that, right? So if you look at it, it's probably fear of failure, fear of rejection, people not carrying what we have to say or whatever.
That's not possible, though.
Yeah, not for you, for sure.
For the literally hundreds of thousands of listeners that we currently have.
Exactly. So
anyway. But so we talked a little bit about like a bear, that kind of, you're jogging and a bear jumps out in the path. There's that kind of fight or flight survival fear. But what April's talking about is fear is easily something that will come up when you identify something that you want. And it could be something very positive. Like, for instance, you bring up, okay, I want to start a podcast. I want to contribute out there. You want to put your own ideas out there. Yeah, I want to help others, or whatever it is. I want to kind of get out there. Well, then there's this fear associated with it. And if you don't acknowledge that fear, if you don't understand that it is fear that you're feeling, and I think that's the toughest thing with feelings, is most people are not used to understanding what the feelings are and to be able to identify them. So they typically have one or two feelings that they're trying to avoid, maybe three or so, and they just accept the impairment side of the feeling. So I think the first step in all of this, you can't do it right until you get the first step, is being able to understand when whatever comes up, I'm afraid. I am afraid. And then you can say, for instance, James, we may have folks in our class on Sunday, and they're going about, they're really scared to death because the marriage is on the rocks. And let's just take the woman as an example. And maybe she's a stay-at-home mom, and she has all of this angst about the relationship and all that. And a lot of it comes from that she has a lot of fear around financial security. And I don't mean like I've got plenty of cash to go into Neiman's anytime I want it. I'm just talking about like, to even stay in our house with the kids and all that kind of stuff. Well, when you can acknowledge that that is the fear and that is the reality, then you can start addressing it. You can start approaching it like, okay, well, wait a minute. I am fearful because the mortgage, the mortgage has to be paid. The electric has to stay on, right? There's all this stuff. But then you can start realize, well, wait a minute. Is my husband ultimately my provider? No, he's not. Right. And so then you have a chance at that point to address the fear in and of itself and start to take steps toward wise steps of wisdom and discernment and that kind of thing. And now as you have actual, I wouldn't say control, but contributions toward the situation, that's going to give you a lot more confidence than if you're trying to control any and everything around it to avoid the fear. And that's the problem, because when you get into judgments and all the downsides of all that, that comes from not wanting to acknowledge fear, you end up, your goal is to stay safe, and your plan to stay safe is to control every variable. And that just doesn't work because you can't control everything.
I don't think we're connected. James, are you there? Anybody home?
Darren and April, can you hear me? James, I cannot hear you. We have lost your audio. Cannot hear you, James. It looks like Darren and April, if their screen is frozen. I cannot hear you, James. Bear with us, folks. We are having some technical difficulties we are trying to work through. We lost audio and video on both. They should be back up in just a few seconds while we're working on this. But we are talking about fear. If you've been watching any of the shows over the past 2 months, April and Darren have talked a lot about the DISC, the DISC, and it is how the different personalities respond and to each other and interact with each other. And so what they've been discussing the last couple of weeks, or this being the 6th week, is fear and how the DISC assessment impacts that, and how we we are able to utilize fear in order to or the different ways that we approach fear. So are you guys back? Can you hear me? And can I hear you?
I can
We're
hear
back.
you.
I can hear
Okay.
y'all. Can you hear me?
All
Yep.
right. So we're back. I tried to carry the water through that. I probably
That was
did a
good.
terrible job, but y'all can watch it later. But all right, folks, thanks for sticking with us. I'm going to jump out of here and let you guys get back on what you were talking about.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Len. Sorry, guys. I don't know what happened. What, as they say in the Zoom world, what's the last thing you heard?
Yeah, well, I know what the last thing I was saying, and
Yeah,
what I was going to share an experience my mom talked about with me. She was married for 18 years to my dad, and when she had fears, she would just try to control everything that she could control. When my parents were having, issues in their marriage. And I mean, because I would reflect back when talking with her about how strict she was and how everything in the house had to be just perfect, and how she would come do an inspection on my drawers and my dresser to make sure I had folded my clothes the right way instead of just stuffed my underwear in a drawer or whatever, you know. And part of that was my mom was clean and she liked organization and she thought that was the best way to raise me. But you know, a lot of it, some of it was driven by her need to control all of her surroundings because she felt out of control and was fearful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can all, if we're honest with ourselves, if we've ever had fear or of fear of something like that, we try to grip it tighter. You know, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, the oh crap handle, right? You grip it, you know, white knuckle it.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Well, all right. So we can see everything now. I don't know what happened with our
Good.
connection, um, but I think I'd like to kind of go into a little bit more on each style,
Yeah.
on how fear might show up. And in April, this might be a little bit on the fly, but let's try to think through
Mm-hmm.
what would be some challenges on identifying that what I'm feeling is fear, as it is based on each letter. Okay, does that make sense? So what I'm trying to,
How to identify?
yeah, because
Yeah.
like let's just say, so okay, look, a D is going to experience fear this way. This is the way it's going to come. But what might be some challenges that could be unique to a D on just being able to identifying what they're feeling is actually fear? Like, could there be a difference between challenges that a D would have versus an S?
Yeah. There will.
And a C and an I, on just even be able to identify, wow, what I'm feeling right now is fear. Because James, in your scenario, I mean, it's likely your mom never even stopped to think about the fact that she was fearful.
Correct. I mean, I think it's looking back. You know,
Yeah.
as she looked back on that. Well, real quick though, before we get into talking about D's and how they process fear, let me tell you about a D that I know. His name is Jeff Jacobs over at Realty Town. Jeff Jacobs and his team have over 125 years of total experience. Is anyone fearful out there that they may not get top dollar for their home, or they may not be able to get the lowest price on a home they might want to buy because they don't have the right representation from a realtor? Jeff Jacobs and his team over at Realty Town, they are the folks for you to call. Need help selling a restaurant space? How about an apartment complex? Any type of commercial property. They're not just residential experts. They've got years, decades of experience in the commercial space as well. So backed by an exceptional support team of professionals, they are absolutely dedicated to stellar service and making your happy place happen. Contact Jeff Jacobs at 972-978-6539 for any need in real estate. And if interested in becoming a realtor, he would be happy to visit with you. Jeff Jacobs, Realty Town.
Awesome.
So yeah, April, let's get into our, maybe I guess start with the D.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's start with the D. It's going to be, and these are all just generalizations. So, you know, we have levels of health, I think, when we talk about all the different styles. So an unhealthy D is going to be a lot less interested and able to do what we're talking about than a healthy D. So you're going to have to self-assess how healthy you are.
Oh Lord.
Which
horrible
isn't
idea.
always the easiest thing.
It's a horrible idea.
Clearly. But I think of all the styles out there, it's going to be the most difficult for a D to tell themselves that they're fearful. And the reason why is because one of the hardest things for a D to do and what they avoid at all cost is vulnerability. They can be pushed into vulnerability. They can kind of be painted into a corner to where they kind of have to say uncle. But their tolerance for that is so high. And that's why you see them being the Pattons of the world, the generals in the Marines, the Green Berets, they're the ones that fear doesn't overtake them because they almost have this I don't know, superpower to kind of keep it at bay. So I think of all the styles out there, to the D's have the most difficulty being really in touch with being vulnerable, and that can mean a lot of different things. I think fear in and of itself means that you are vulnerable. So you have to be able to tell yourself, first of all, you're not a superhero, right? So, and so many times D's they see themselves as, give me the ball, I got it. Where do you need it to go? Where's the line? Show me and let me go. I got this. Everybody hang on my back and I'll get us all to safety, or I'll get us all to the goal, or I'll get us all to the win, whatever it might be. And that's what makes D's beautiful. The upside downness of that is that you don't see the vulnerability that you have.
Yeah, but isn't it also true that D's kind of, once you get them to kind of turn and be willing to face it, become some of the most coachable and engaged people in a let's call it a healing process?
Yeah, but it takes a really healthy D, and I believe a really spiritually healthy D, to be able to say, okay,
thank you.
There is someone above me, right? Because a lot of times unhealthy Ds, you will find, have no authority, they have no mentors, they have no authority above them. They actually have authority problems because they are the authority, and they surround themselves with people who look to them for direction. And so
would it be true that a D would, of all the styles, the D would agree with this statement the most? Fear is evidence of weakness.
Well, for sure. That's right. And the point here that I kind of wanted to say was that loss of power, right? Loss of power equals weakness. And so any sort of being like, looking like you've been taken advantage of, looking like you were weak in any way, that equals kind of the loss of power. And then overall, just the failure, like we said last week, the failure to achieve your standards, whatever that person's standards are, because D's define their own standard. They're not looking for a Scooby snack from me or you to say, oh, you did a great job, unless of course you have some I in there. But a pure, true, straight D, loss of power, looking vulnerable, feeling vulnerable, which means weakness, all of those are kind of tied together. And so I think of all the styles, it's going to be the most difficult for them to really say, what am I feeling right now? Because a lot of times when you see a D, the way I read it, when I see a D getting angry, I know they're scared. And so if I can, and remember there was a guy in our group.
Oh, I remember that guy.
His name starts with a J, and he was in our class, and he got up in front of the class and he looked like the biggest jerk. James, do you remember that? Were you there for that? Oh my gosh. And every person in that room was just like, oh my gosh, this guy, like, how in the world? He was married to this very soft, as sweet,
always,
gentle, lady. And everybody in that room, I mean, all the women wanted to scratch his eyes out. You could just see, because he was saying some really crazy stuff. And after the class, I went up and I talked to him, and began to ask him specific questions to reveal what that was actually about. And really what it was about was he was fearful. He was starting a new company. His dad had abandoned him. I mean, he basically just handed me everything in about 3 minutes. He was like, boom, 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 here it is. And that's what's great, because D's are, what you see is what you get. And that's the great part about it. And they'll hand you the information because they really do want to do better. They want to be better. But I think it's harder
because they want to win.
They just want to do well.
Yeah, but they want to. Yeah, and they want to win. And I think you can go back and read like biographies about guys like Pat and these guys that we would see, and you'd find out that there was a lot of anxiety these guys had, and it wasn't that they weren't fearful. They just ignored it.
Yeah, they pushed through it.
They pushed through and they ignored it, which is what we're not recommending. We're recommending that you identify it and that you take appropriate steps because of fear, and the outcome, the giftedness of doing that, which is a difficult process, but is to gain wisdom and discernment. And you're not just plowing through it. A lot of times the patterns of the world or whatever, that may be what happened. But anyway, I do think it's a very, very difficult for D's, as being one myself. As I walked through this process back in the mid 2000s, let's say, or the aughts, whatever we called those. I think we call them. Didn't we call them aughts?
I never called it the aught. Whatever.
I think it's the aughts. But anyway, like 2004, 2006, 7, somewhere in that ballpark, right? But I tell you, man, once the switch gets flipped for D, they can get very focused, and then now
they move quickly too.
And that now it's like now I got it, and I know where I want to go, and then it's like I can't get enough. But until that point, yeah, you probably get a lot of resistance.
Here's some things to look for. If you know a D and you sense that maybe they're fearful, like things that you could look for, right? So they can tend to get really overly critical.
Judgmental.
Yeah, they're critical. So they're critical of the mailman. They're critical of the babysitter. They're critical of the, whoever. It just in general, they're overly critical. I think another one is they become very impatient and demanding. So consistently. And then another one is, when they feel that kind of loss of power, you'll see them get more aggressive and more kind of overpowering. So if you know a D who kind of shows these on a daily basis, even on an hourly basis, and not that D's can't show that every once in a while, but I'm saying like they live in that world where it's constant criticism of everyone around them. It's constantly being overpowering, and it's constantly kind of having that, just bad attitude. I think it's a place to be able to sit down and go, hey, I wanted to talk to you about this and bring up, vulnerability and fear, and see what you can help them come up with.
Yeah, I think we see it in especially in guys. You're going to see it a lot with trying to insert physicalness into a situation. So I know normal guys back in the day, they've had some success in barroom fights kind of thing. So they feel comfortable in knowing if I can drag this out into the street, into a dumpster fire, then I know what to do. Then I know I
can show my power.
Yeah, I can start
to show my
power.
I
can start chucking knuckles and knocking teeth out, and that's a way for me to try to get to a place where I feel like I'm the big dog on the porch. And that's a sign of there's fear there, and they don't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
So they're going to go to whatever they think is going to give them the best chance of winning, and the best chance of not feeling that. And remember, you're running away from something, running to something.
Right.
I'm running away from that feeling
of vulnerability,
which is vulnerability,
and running to
and
power.
I'm going to run to where I can show everybody. Because I'm going to be the last dude standing in the parking lot. I mean, that's an extreme way, but that's
but in general, when I see someone who's really angry, these tend to show
rageful.
Okay. Well, yeah, as a rageful person, they're just kind of always on edge. They're kind of just, they can keep it together for about 2 days.
But that's the way they're handling the anxiety. They've moved into the impairment. They're in anxiety and they can't do anything about it. So they're on edge all the time. Everything frustrates them.
It would seem like that might be that's their way to control and to keep the edge,
right.
Stay in control of everything.
Right.
By using anger. Lyndon, our producer and
he's like that. Yeah, I know. He
is very angry. That's why we
with
keep him
anger
off of camera here. But he posed a question. But before I get to Lyndon's question, I want to talk about Lyndon real quick with the difference. The difference, which is the reason we're able to broadcast here. Is a digital video branding and broadcast company that helps small business owners create and produce their own unique radio, live stream, and podcast show. So whether you'd like to advertise on The Difference, or maybe you've got an idea for a show, It doesn't have to be about your specific industry. For example, we're here with Delicate Moving, and we don't talk about trucks. We don't talk about furniture, even though that's what Delicate Moving does. We talk about things that will move you in a direction to the giftedness of your emotions, for example. So maybe you've got a show topic that has nothing to do with your industry, but you want to get your company out there, your business out there, and promote a show. Contact The Difference. Get with Lyndon at 972-866-4596 or email Lyndon at lyndonw@thedifferenceradio.com. So yeah, that's the difference. Lyndon's question that he posed, and I think it's a good one. Are D's more typically? Do you find narcissists to be D's? Or there's more commonality with D's? Do they, fall into that more?
Before April,
I'm drooling.
Well, so before April answers, Lyndon, we'll give you credit for this, James. We'll just do some show prep time right here live. Lyndon, you brought up probably the absolute most what could be a very crucial topic that we need to have a whole series on.
Yes.
And in April will wax eloquent on all of those, because this is a topic that we have been talking about. It is becoming more and more apparent to us. I mean, narcissism in all of its forms throughout the spectrum. We see this more and more in marriages. I mean, it's off the chart. And what I would say is, I'll let April give her answer here, but what I would say is, you can see narcissism in D's probably the easiest and the quickest with maybe a DI. It is in every style, and that it is some of them are very difficult to notice and to be able to understand, but it is present in all of them. Would you not agree?
I would. I want to say that.
But what does that have to do with me, by the way?
That's right. I've been studying narcissism. I mean, I sit around and watch, I don't even know how many hundreds of hours and read about it. I think it, especially in today's society here in America, especially, it's a pandemic. What is it?
It could be an epidemic.
Epidemic. It is. It's an epidemic. I mean, turn on the Kardashians, turn on any like Real Housewives of wherever. Hell's Kitchen. We watch people.
It's celebrated.
It's celebrated by our culture of, the more narcissistic you are, the more interesting it is. And that we are giving, Cardi B and this guy and that guy and all these different singers and rappers and,
LeBron James.
The more self-focused you are, the better it is. And we reward that. What I will say is that narcissists are made, they are not born. And that's one thing that I want to repeat out there, because I think that we need to do more as parents, more education about how we are making our children narcissistic, because they are not born little narcs. Well, they're born fallen, right? But narcissism is created when you
the ingredients are there, the cake isn't baked.
Right, but the way that a parent makes a narcissist is they indulge and ignore. They indulge and ignore. They indulge and ignore. Indulge and ignore. And you just keep doing that to a kid. And maybe that's, hey, we got divorced and this kid, he sees me every 2 weeks and, I don't show up where I'm supposed to be. Yeah. And then I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And then he's here and I take him to the mall and buy him anything he wants. And then I do that over time. And it could be things you're giving them or things you're doing, but we make someone narcissistic. So, and that happens from from kind of the early ages on. I think all of us have narcissistic tendencies because we're fleshly humans and we, we want what we want. I think what happens over time is you begin to mature out of that in your, early teens, 13, 14, 15. You get another chance kind of in your early 20s. And then by that time, it's either set and you have to work really, really hard to come out of it in your 30s and 40s and 50s. Now, I'll go back to the original question is, do Ds have a tendency to be narcissistic more so than the other styles? I'll go back to Darren. I think that because Ds are what you see is what you get, they tend to be what we would call either a malignant narcissist or kind of an overt narcissist, meaning that you can see they don't really care what you have to say. They're kind of just waiting for you to be done talking. They're interested in what they want to do, and they're not really listening.
But isn't it also true that D's tend to be more narcissistic because they're just more awesome?
They are. They're cooler to themselves.
I mean, I think that can play into it. The fact that D's are clearly kind of the winners.
Right. They are.
In life.
The one's named Darren has the actual D as the first letter of their name.
I mean, don't you guys remember that song, "Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way"? I mean, it's kind of like
it is. That's your run-in song.
What do you do?
Anyway, go ahead, James.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think my mom was intentionally trying to prevent me from becoming a narcissist, but I mean, I remember her at a young age and pounding into my head that the world does not revolve around you.
Yep.
And you're not the center of the world. And I got a lot of attention from my parents, but I don't know. I just grew up thinking that and believing that. And I think what we've done in society, and you can see it on Facebook, you can see it on talk shows, you can see it, we've come up with these little ways of trying to lift people up out of maybe a low place. Like, you just be you, honey, or sweetie, you just do you. You're good enough without this person. But we say these things to people over and over to where pretty soon then it becomes all about them. It's not just do you or be you, be yourself. It becomes nothing matters but you.
Right.
And then and everything is an inward focus. I mean, we talk about our kids all the time. I mean, I explain to my wife, who doesn't have any of her own children, and I try, I explain to her, and not explain to her like she doesn't know, but actually as we're having conversation, I'm like, we have to remember, Jackson is going to be inwardly focused.
Right.
So
he's got a lot of eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. She goes, well, does he understand this about me, or does he understand this about you? And I go, oh, he probably he can write it down if we ask him to define it or explain it, but it doesn't matter. He's inwardly focused. He wants what he wants when he wants it.
Right. Well, and that's all of us, right? That's just us in our fallenness. And I think as parents, we have to help our kids out of that. But yes, what I would say is, I think you could be an overt narcissist and be a D and be an I. I think as you get down into the S and the C world, what you see more often, especially in the S world, is what's called a covert narcissist. And they are, or what some people might call a victim narcissist. Now, let's also say that narcissistic personality disorder is a disorder. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about kind of narcissistic tendencies or traits.
You know what's funny is I feel like we're doing the narcissist show right now.
I know, it's so great. But so what I would say is that the S's, there are covert narcissists, but his question, he says, do the other quadrants seem to be more refined in their narcissism? And by refined, I guess you're saying hidden. And the word I would say is yes. Everything, the D is never hidden. Very rarely.
What you see is what you get,
because it's just too much energy. Now you start getting some I and some C in there, then they can start hiding things to be strategic or to be manipulative. But the pure D is just going to kind of be out there.
Okay, so in order to get back, we've got 20 minutes left today. So could we go on to the I and talk about what would the I? And by the way, thanks for screwing up the show, Lyndon, today. No, I'm joking. This is
narcissism is it's just a big thing right now.
This is a great topic, and we really do need to spend time in shows talking about it. But
I would say 8 out of 10 marriages that we're working with right now, one of them has high level of tendency for narcissism, and the other one is an empath. So if you're interested and you want to go look it up, type in Google, type in narcissist married to an empath, and decide which one you are. Okay.
Yeah, and you're going to see it a lot in business too. I mean, especially like if you're in sales, that kind of thing. And, you know, at first you kind of may see someone like, wow, that's a really driven, on point person, you know, and then you realize, no, this is beyond a get her done kind of guy or gal. This is someone who literally is incapable of thinking outside of themselves.
Well, that is the perfect segue there, Darren, for our next sponsor here that's going to lead us into our next letter here. And that would be Brian Poduska over at Real Property Management Focus. They are definitely get her done guys and gals over there. If you need someone to work with you on your investment property, they're the folks you want to call over at Real Property Management Focus. In addition to their basic property management services, which they are fantastic at, they also offer real estate investment partnership through their industry unique Wealth Optimizer tool. Now, I'm not going to tell you about the Wealth Optimizer tool. I'm just going to tell you should call them and find out more about it and get educated, because I think it'll benefit you if you are looking into a partnership for some real estate properties. If you're thinking about jumping in the real estate investment pool or already swimming in it and need a property management company that prides itself in communication and integrity, please give Brian Poduska a call at 469-820-0088 or look them up online at realpmfocus.com. All right.
All right. So go to the eyes.
Okay.
What are the eyes?
The eyes.
How are they going to be afraid?
The eyes are probably the most manipulative of all the styles.
Interesting.
Yep.
I would have guessed that.
You would not have?
No, I don't think so.
No. Which one do you think is the most?
Well, I'll refrain from saying that. But
I will. I'll say no. Let me tell you why.
Well, everyone has.
I would say
everyone's manipulative. All styles are.
Well, they're all very, very different. The way all of them manipulate. But I would have said, and I don't know if I said the most. I would have said
they're the best.
Who is the eyes?
Mm-hmm.
See, I would have said C's, because C's are so strategic.
Okay, but let me tell you why.
I would
go,
be better,
Let
right?
me tell you why, and then you guys can.
I mean, do you agree, James? Wouldn't you have said that?
I mean, yeah, I guess I can agree, since my wife's not going to be listening today.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, well,
Just kidding.
Let me tell you why.
I don't mind.
Here's the reason why eyes are the best at manipulating.
All right, go.
It's because their superpower is reading people. The C's don't have the ability
that's true.
to read what you really want without you saying it. And an I can. Now, if the C...
I'm married to an I.
Yes, you are.
Holy
sir.
cow.
And so and again, we're talking about unhealth, right? And so we're talking about fear. So I've
been punked my entire marriage.
It's like on a matrix level when she's
blue pill or red pill.
It's like 27 years. She's just absolutely
we're
been punking
pulling
me.
back the covers. Okay, here's the thing.
I'm onto you now.
So feeling fear for eyes is the worst. It's just absolutely the worst. And I probably say that because I am an eye, but the eyes tend to want to be in this world, kind of Pollyannic world where everything's great and happy and everyone's joyful and everyone's kind of hitting on all cylinders. And
you'd rather go to Six Flags than a funeral,
or have a broken rib, right? Well, I have a broken rib, but I'm going to Six Flags and just pretending it doesn't exist. I think that
people don't realize that's a true story that happened in the last 2 weeks.
I think we told them last week.
Rode 12 out of 14 rides with a
right now,
but yet would lay in bed every night and say, "Could you help push me up because I can't even get out of bed?" Like,
well, okay. She's trying to explain to you why and how she's able to explain it. So let her go. Here we go.
So
we need counseling.
So what we do is we manipulate our surroundings. So, feeling fear. What's going to drive fear for us is really pretty simple. A lot of it is rejection of people around us. Fear of rejection, not real rejection, actually. It's the fear of rejection.
It's not even.
It's just the thought of it, which some people might call anxiety because you're being anxious about something that hasn't happened. So actually, the fear of rejection is more powerful than the actual rejection itself, because we are imaginative, creative people, and so we play all these things out in our head that probably won't even ever happen. And the actual rejection that we would feel is probably half of what we made it up in our mind. But that's the world in which we live. I think fear of rejection, what was the other one I wanted to say, was loss of approval or attention. That's another one.
So if I can just live in Disney World, then I don't have to face any of this.
If you can be a performer at Disney World, where everyone would clap for you all the time.
But it's not real. And that's the problem, is you want to try to create.
Well, none of it's real.
Yeah, you want to try to create. Well, the admission price is real, trust me. But it's like the world, you can't live in that world all the time. I mean, pets get run over, family members die. I mean, there's a harshness obviously to life, and you can't always live that way. If you're in business, you're going to lose the deal, and it's not going to be fun. You may be trying to sell to people that you don't even like them.
Yeah,
and they don't like you.
That's what, when we talk about manipulation, we can manipulate people into giving us what we want. We can manipulate giving us approval. We can manipulate giving us attention.
Well, you don't tell me. 27 years
giving us not giving criticism. Always being in that place of applause, and so there's a lot of fear that's generated about what happens if we lose that. And again, I think you can always tie these things back to a spiritual place, right? So for D's, being vulnerable, that means that someone is above you, right? That's getting to the heart of what God wants to work on in your heart. You're vulnerable, bud, and there is someone above you, and you must yield. And until you do that, we're going to keep singing this song. So however that works. And then for the eyes, it is, you are approved of. You're approved of by me.
Or there might be something about you that needs to change, and you're not perfect the way you are.
Well, that's the fear. The fear is that I'm not what I should be. And so I have to hide all of those things and pretend and manipulate and do all this, and perform for the Scooby snack, right? Whereas God's looking at it going, no, you're perfect in my sight, and you need to relax. And it's not about getting things horizontally, it's about getting things vertically. So the fears that really drive us, like at the depths of who we are, I think you can almost be prescriptive biblically and go, okay, well, this is your prescription. Go look at that. Study that one thing. You need to study being vulnerable and why you need to stay vulnerable. And eyes, you need to study why you're constantly in need of approval of man. What is that about? And are you on the performance treadmill consistently in every element of your life, trying to get someone to give you the pat on the back? And what is that? How that's just endless. It's literally an insatiable, endless hole that can never be filled.
Let's jump to the C real quick.
C's? What about S's? You missed.
Well, I did, because you just brought up something, because I was thinking of a guy that is actually a pastor, and actually a pretty dang good one at that. I mean, scholarly work, great communication skills, but there seems to be a disconnect. There seems to be this just huge need to be approved by people, and the way approval has always been handed out to him has been through, you are really smart. You're the smartest boy in third grade or whatever, right? And so you look at this and realize that because that has never been dealt with, that the fear of I've not been approved of, and the fact that he is a C, right, it absolutely handicaps his ability to really thrive, in my opinion. And it's one of these deals where it's like when you're speaking, it's just like there's so much effort in trying to prove every week that I'm the smartest guy in the room. And I kind of feel like they said of, Madonna, would someone please notice her so we can all get on with our lives? And I feel that way. It's like, could someone just please say, dude, you're the smartest guy in the room, go. And then it would be like he could relax and then he could actually do his job better.
Can't because then there's someone else he'll have to prove it to, and someone else will have to prove it to.
I mean,
so it's just that's what I'm saying.
I hope everybody can see how that would be debilitating. Like that would absolutely get in the way of every relationship and this guy in his job, right? And he could be in sales, it could be whatever. I mean, if you walked in every sales meeting, you had to spend the first 5 minutes proving that you were smarter than everyone else, that you weren't going to get anything wrong, blah, blah, blah. That would be horrible.
Well, that's when the C and I
are clashing.
Yeah, when they're mixing. Right. It's when they're mixing. And you don't see that very often because there's not a ton of C and I's. But let's talk about S and we'll wrap up with C. So S is pretty easy. S is the upside down version of D. So we always look at S and go, oh, there are people pleasers. Oh, they just want everyone to get along. Oh, they're the servers and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of fears that are in the S's where D's cover that, S's push it out. Does that make sense?
Say that again.
So S's are okay looking vulnerable.
Oh, yeah.
D's, they don't want to look vulnerable. So it's an opposite version. So I think that for S's, the fear is about, not, like I said last week, I want you to have all your needs met, but I want it to be because I met them. Right. So it's an upside down version of pride that
and I don't need the recognition, but actually I kind of do.
Well, yes and no. I think that they fear, the biggest fear is probably letting somebody down in whatever way that might look, because they're okay with being vulnerable, and I'll be the one in the background, and I'm the one that's going to take on everything for everybody else. And these are normally the covert narcissists. They're the victim-y or vulnerable narcissists. When you see narcissism come into play, that's what usually comes out. But it's basically being, fearful that you're going to let somebody down, that you're going to do something that wasn't expected, that you're going to have any sort of D. It's good that you're going to look like a D in any way. That's a big fear. I think aggression and the word I'm trying to think of is like, fighting. What's the word? Like
conflict?
Yeah. Conflict avoidance.
It's like
I know.
It's like I'm on a show with Joe Biden.
Lunch, so
it's like Joe Biden. You can't.
Sleepy Joe.
What do you call that? What do you call that? The government.
The government. When I ran for Senate,
he's running for the Senate. Leave him alone. Okay?
I know. When I run for Senate, I can't think of the word conflict.
And I think in school council.
Yeah. Yes. So fear of conflict, and really what that is it's saying I can't really share my real opinions, because if I do, it's going to get messy. And so I don't like messy, and I don't like conflict, and I really don't want to put it out there. And they're not going to listen to me anyway. So I'm just going to be the martyr. And there's some comfort in that. There's some comfort sometimes in the martyrdom and in the victimization. There's some comfort in really sitting and feeling that vulnerability. Whereas those D's are trying to get away from it at all costs, the S's in their unhealth will swim around in it. And so,
I mean, what percentage of marriage issues show
DNS?
A
lot.
And let's even go down. The guy's the D and the lady's the S. I mean, if you took that is such a huge, and then you mix in what Lyndon's talking about with the narcissism. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're a match made in heaven.
Right. We know 15 right off the top of our head.
I mean, and they just go through life until the S absolutely is just drowned. They can't take it anymore. It's become so overwhelming.
A lot of times they just go to the grave. And the reason they go to the grave is because of their children.
I'll take one for the
They don't
team.
want the children to be upset. They don't want the children, you know.
That was even more true that was even more true 40, 50 years ago.
Absolutely.
You think so?
Absolutely.
I'll tell you what.
It's bad now, though.
I can name.
No, it is, but divorce is more acceptable now. The divorce rate was lower.
Yeah, I mean, sure, that whole acceptance of being a divorcee or whatever, that was kind of like, but the pressure of the children and what the children are going to experience and how the children are going to feel and the shock and what it's going to look like for, you know, weddings and graduations and grandchildren. I mean, it's as powerful today as it was then. But I think there's a lot of fear and what you begin to see is, again, control, but they're controlling it. They're controlling that fear in a lot of different ways. They're comfortable sitting in fear and calling it fear, whereas the D's are not. So you got to go there.
They're comfortable being vulnerable.
They're comfortable. They know they know
that language better.
And so it's kind of like, you know, we always talk about their wick is a lot longer, you know, and they kind of take it and take it and take it and take it.
Long suffering.
Long suffering. And there's something in them that's like, that's your role. Your role as a good Christian wife or husband is to be long suffering.
Or as a supporting cast member. Your job is just to get kind of, you know, almost picked on, or, you know, you're the garbage can, right? I mean, you're the one that's going to take all that, and the D's never going to do that. He's the one throwing all the trash out. Let the S pick it up,
right? And the S likes to pick it up.
Oh man,
and
I
so
need to pick this up. Yeah,
and so it's kind of a it's completely designed to do it horribly. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And we've got like 3 or 4 minutes left, max.
Do we have one more thing?
Yeah.
James,
you want to talk about C real quick?
Yeah.
3 minutes to wrap up. I hear.
Well, I don't know, James, you got one more.
Well, let's wrap up. Well, you said to do things horribly, and that's what a lot of moving companies out there are doing right now, is they're giving people a horrible moving experience, but you can trust in Delicate Moving to give you a wonderful 5-star experience. Delicate Moving, 64% of our business this year has been from referrals and or repeat customers, whether it's a small apartment move or whether you need to get a few pieces moved out into the garage or into storage to get ready for your holiday company family to come in and you want to make room for them, or whether you're moving a large 3,000-4,000 square foot home. Delicate Moving is the answer. We're a company you can count on and trust with your furniture and prized possessions. We offer storage, full packing, and anything that has to do with moving your household goods or your office. Give us a call, 214-972-0502, Delicate Moving. I'll just wrap it up and say that we are in a fearful world, as we started off with at the beginning of the show, and that fear really seems to be keeping a lot of us away from our purpose. And I think even as this country, if we look at our country, I think our country has served a purpose as a light on a hill for a long time in this world, this very dark world. And the United States is not a perfect world by any chance, by any stretch of the imagination. We have our sins as a country. We have our the things that we're still working through to get it right here in this country. But I think if we want our country to continue to be a great place for people from all over the world to come and make a better place for themselves, I think we need to become less fearful and not engage in the fear. And I've been hearing so many people talk about voting, and that is coming up. So I would encourage everyone to vote and to just think about this. Which party, I will say this, and this may be a little too political for some people, but I'll say this: which party out there and their platform, not what their politician says to you, but what their platform says they stand for. Which one scares you the most, and which America scares you the most? And that should help you in the way that you vote. For all of our sponsors out there, we thank you for supporting our show. Thank you, Lyndon, for helping us deliver a show each and every week. Darren and April, I can't thank you enough for a great show week in and week out. You guys are so.
That's exactly right, James. You can't.
You're welcome. I'm not even going to try. So I'm just going to move on.
Thank you for having us, though.
Yeah.
But April, I do appreciate you specifically. So, hey, everyone, have a great week. And let's figure out a way to not let our fears drive us into the impairment.
That's right.
side of things. And maybe we'll get into this narcissistic thing a little bit more next week. For
Yeah.
everyone out here, Moving Conversations, have a great week, and we'll see you next time.